Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Volt Robot Battle Arena. This is from Nazca Games, and this is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players. I don't know how a solo game will work, but 2 to 4 players, where you are basically, the theme of the game sort of harkens back to, I want to say the 90s, where you would watch on TV, maybe the early 2000s, or on TV they'd actually have robot competitions where people would build like functional robots, not with artificial intelligence or anything, but functional robots, and they'd put them in an arena and fight each other. I know there was some show like that on Comedy Central or something, and there's, still to this day, in fact, at the high school that I live next to, they have robot competitions between students. So this game is sort of that, but in the future where robots are like really advanced, they have weaponry and things like that, and you're basically just trying to get enough victory points by destroying your opponent, pushing them down pits, or primarily, actually, what your goal is to get to this certain point on this random checkpoint on the board, where if you can get to it at the end of your turn, you're actually going to get a point. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. This is all sort of overview things. This game is most often going to be compared to Robo Rally, which has a very similar theme, but how similar is it as far as gameplay? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the game, then we're going to come back, and I'll give you my opinion. Alright, let's give a brief overview of Volt Robot Battle Arena. This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players where basically you're trying to accrue 5 victory points. And I suppose you can do more victory points if you want to have a longer game, or less if you want to do a shorter game, but these are the victory point markers right here. And the way that you're going to get victory points are a few different ways. First off, out here on the board, we have this die. This looks different from the other dice that you see here on the board. And I should mention also there's multiple different boards that you can use. There's the flip side to this board, and then there's another board here that you also has different setup here. And you'll see that the main difference are the locations of these little blue checkpoint markers here, and also the location of pits. But the little repair area moves around as well. But regardless, we'll just use this board as an example. So at the start of the game, you're going to roll this die, and whatever comes up on the die is where you're going to put it on the board. The number that comes up on the die goes on that numbered space. If you are able to successfully land your robot, and here's the little robots here out on the board. Let me see if I can clear that up just a bit. Yeah, here's the little robots. They all kind of look the same, just different colors. And you have your own little player boards here with all the different colors, although everyone's got the same programming board and dice behind their shield. But if you're actually able to move one of your robots onto that checkpoint space and keep it by the end of the game, or I'm sorry, by the end of the round, you're going to score one of these victory point markers. If you destroy another robot, and each robot has 3 hit points, you'll keep track of them using these delightful little tokens here. If you destroy one of your opponent's robots, you also get a victory point. If you successfully push one of these robots into one of these pits, then you get a victory point. Although you don't get a point just because someone falls in a pit. You have to be the one that actively pushes them in some way, somehow. And those are basically the ways that you're going to get victory points in the game. The first person to 5 points is going to be declared the winner, unless you want to do a longer or shorter game. Now, how do you actually go about doing this? Well, as you can see, everyone's got their own little robot here, and really, whichever player that you are sitting, or what side of the board you're sitting next to, you can actually start off anywhere along the edge of the board that you want. Just put them there for convenience sake. But once everyone's got their robots picked out, they've got their little shields up and their control boards and their dice, then you're actually going to program the actions of your robot. Everyone does this at the same time. Everyone has a red, white, and blue dice, and you never roll these dice at all. Instead, what you're doing is programming your actions with them. So let's say that you want to program your movement. Well, on your little control board here, these little blue and white arrows here will indicate your movement, and it's all relative to where you're sitting at the table. So if the green player here wanted to go ahead and set the dice for movement, what he would do is he would take one of these dice, set it to one of the numbers that he wants secretly behind his shield, and put it in one of the 4 cardinal directions. Now, that means that at some point, hopefully, during that player's turn, if I set it on 4, that player's robot is going to move forward 4 relative to him. Now, the other control area over here is basically your robot's weaponry. And that goes actually in the 4 cardinal directions and then also in diagonals as well. So again, you'll put one of those die there, and hopefully, if you get a chance to resolve it, you will shoot in that direction. Now, you might say, well, how do you determine who goes first and how these actions are resolved? Well, that's where the color and the number of the dice come in. You always resolve actions in red, white, and blue. So once everyone has programmed all of their actions here on the board, I'll just do this guy for simplicity's sake, everyone will raise up their shields and reveal the dice that they have. So the way it'll work is that once one person is done, he'll give some sort of indication like a thumbs up that he's done. Then once everyone's done that, everyone flips up their shields all at once. When everyone's revealed their shields and revealed the dice that they have, those dice are locked in. You can't do anything with them. And then you start resolving the dice. Now, you can only put 2 dice on movement, but other than that, you're good to go. And you resolve these in red, white, and blue order. So everyone will look at their red die, and then you'll resolve it from lowest up to highest. So the lowest die is always faster. So someone that has a red 1 is most likely to go first, where someone that has a red 6 is most likely to go last, whether it's movement or firing. If there's a tie for that, you add up the sum total of all of the dice you have, regardless of what they're used for, and whoever has the lowest there gets to go. And if it's still a tie, you have these markers here, which you'll randomize and then grab, and on the other side is 1 through 4. Whoever grabs the lowest number, then they get to go and resolve their action. And you're going to do red, then white, then blue. You're going to do the same thing each time, resolving each of these dice for each of the players. Now, of course, bad things could very well happen. If a robot gets destroyed, like I mentioned earlier, not only does that person get a victory point, the person who did it, but that robot comes off the map, you don't get any of your other actions, you respawn at the end of, or near the end of the rounds. Also, if you get pushed into a pit, you're off the board, you respawn at the end of your rounds, but other than that, you don't lose any victory points or anything bad like that, or no one gets to steal your victory points away, they just gain them. Now, firing has some interesting consequences as well. If you successfully hit someone, so what would happen is, let's say that, now the dice for your movement dictate how many spaces you actually move the number on them, but for firing, you just fire in a row no matter what. The distance is always the same. So you're either firing in one of the cardinal directions or diagonal. So let's say that I had this blue die here, and red's not able to get out of the way in time, and green shoots and hits red. Now, the number on the die, it's definitely a hit, but the number on the die will dictate exactly what happens. And that's where this little handy-dandy reference sheet on the back of each of the screens is going to come in handy. So if you used a 1 for that, very simply the person takes a damage, no problem. So like I said, 3 damage is enough to destroy a robot. They'll also take damage if you do any of the other die as well, but some negative things might happen. So if you put a 2 there, that person has to roll, if they're hit, that person has to move all of their dice 45 degrees on the board. If they roll, if it was a 3, it's 45, and that's clockwise. If it's a 3, it's 45 degrees counterclockwise. If it's a 5, it's 90 degrees. If it's a 4, it's also 90 degrees. If it's a 6, you don't move their dice at all, but you push the opponent back 1 space, which, of course, could lead them into a pit. Also, if you move into an opponent and you would have enough movement to move past them, or if you hit them with the 6 gun and that person gets pushed into another opponent, you push opponents back, which could also knock them into a pit or totally mess up where they were trying to move to, because they're still programmed to move in a certain way and they must move in that direction. And of course, like I said, your goal is to ultimately use your movement dice to land on that die if you can, to score victory points that way, or maybe you just want to focus on destroying your opponents and pushing them into pits. But that's basically how the game is going to play. You're going to keep programming your dice, trying to put yourself in a position to score, either through destruction or getting the checkpoint. Now, there was one extra thing I want to talk about in the game, and these are these technical modules here, which are actually basically ways to improve your robot. And you'll decide at the beginning of the game whether you're going to use these or not, in different ways that you can use them. You can either choose one at random, put it on the board, and then from then on, each of the robots in the game, every robot has that same ability. Or you can choose to draft them, everyone gets their own, or everyone gets 3 modules to choose from, or everyone gets all 3 and uses them all during the combat, and so on. And these just have basic, like, fun effects that will break the game. So, for instance, this token here, you'll have to refer to the rulebook for what they specifically do, because it doesn't say on the token, but this one is a shock effect, so whenever you stop moving, you'll shock everyone for a point of damage if they happen to be adjacent to you. This one here is saw blades. This is pretty fun. If you push someone by moving into them, you actually deal them damage because you rip them apart. You have the twin laser here, which deals double damage if you hit someone with your gun. And the portal gun, which, much like it suggests, if you manage to hit someone, you teleport them to other places. It just causes chaos and havoc. And that's basically the game. Try to get as many points as you can, however you can. That's Volt. Well, like I said in my intro, this game is going to be compared to Robo Rally. It's just inevitable. I'm sure at a certain point, the designer of the game, who's a very nice guy, is going to be very sick of hearing that. Although, Robo Rally is very well regarded by a lot of people, not by me. So it's actually can be considered high praise. The thing about it is there are some very significant differences between the two. The main difference is that both games have these sort of programmed movements where you can determine what you're going to do, but you cannot account for what your opponent may do. All you can do is try to predict and anticipate that, and of course random chaos ensues. The difference is that in Robo Rally you have the randomization of these cards that you draw, and you may get stuck with cards that you can't use, or you can use but they're not going to do you any good, and there's just a lot more randomness, in my opinion, to Robo Rally, especially with all the different things that are on the map like conveyor belts. I mean, it could just totally throw you off. In Volts, again, you have the randomness of not knowing what your opponent is going to do and just trying to predict it as best you can. But what you do, you have total control over what you do every turn. Total control. I mean, there are rules of how you place your dice. You can only use 2 dice for movement and things like that. But other than that, you decide how fast you're going to go. Are you going to use the low numbers on your dice, knowing that they're not as effective as using the higher numbers on your dice? Do you try to just avoid your opponents, circle around as much as possible, and only attack when you have to? These are all things you have total control of on your turn. So it becomes purely just anticipating the thoughts and reactions of your opponent. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's like chess, but in a way it is, because again, if you are really good at anticipating what your opponent's going to do, you will excel at this game. I'm terrible at this game. I've played this a few times now, and one of the games that I won, but I totally feel that it was luck. The first time I played this game, well, let me backtrack. I like this game. I like this game a lot. But the first time that I played it, I was very, very frustrated. I was like, I'm going to flip the table. Because, again, you have to be able to know what's going to happen. If you try to plan exactly what you're going to do on your turn and just hope that it goes well, like it's going to go perfectly, you are going to be sorely, sorely disappointed. Nothing is going to work out perfectly in this game, unless, even if everyone's doing the same thing, inevitably you're going to run into each other, you're going to get pushed into a pit. All of these different things can happen. So at a certain point, what I realized is that you have to just let it go. Just let all that stress go and just say, I'm going to do the best I can. What's he going to do? What's he going to do? What she's going to do? And try to anticipate that and just move forward and hope that you do your best. And, it can still be kind of tense, but at a certain point, once you let go of that and just realize that all of your best plans are going to be ruined, but use what skills you have to try to do at least a little better, then the game becomes really, really fun. Now, what I will say is that the base game is just fun. I mean, I would think that I would probably get tired of it after a while. After the first game that we played, we introduced the modules, the enhancement that each of the robots can get. That adds a tremendous amount of value to the game. I will never not play with them, and in fact, I will always probably do the variants that they list in the back of the book. You could either draft the little module tokens and keep one of them, or you can just have everyone have like 3, or I guess however many you want of the different module tokens, which would probably completely break the game, but would also be a tremendous amount of fun. My favorites, I love the exploding, like when someone kills you, you explode. One that one time I had the enhancement where I was shocking people whenever I stopped my movement, and that caused someone to explode, which caused me to explode. There's razor blades, there's teleportation, like portal guns. I mean, there's just a lot of really fun modules to this game. So it adds a lot of variability to the game. It's really fun. And it makes each of your robots distinct. That's kind of one of the problems that I have with the game, is that if it wasn't for those modules and using the variant where everyone has a different one, because I think the main rule for the modules is that you pick one at random and everyone has that same power. But if you don't give everyone a unique module, there's nothing differentiating your robots other than their color. Even the miniatures look the same, and I understand that. You can't always spend a lot of money on miniatures and things like that. I do just wish that the robots were a little more distinct. So that's a minor complaint with the game. I think that the gameplay length is a little low for what the box says. I believe the box says 30 minutes for a match. But when you add modules, that's going to add time, especially if you draft them. But okay, I understand that. You might not always play with modules, but I think that this game can be kind of prone to AP, analysis paralysis. Not to an absurd degree, but this is where I go back to trying to let it go. If you have players who just really want to try to make the perfect plan, you can sit there for a long time behind your board, moving those dice around, putting them on different numbers until, you know, more than once, and I've guilty of this myself, one player has been just sitting there trying to get his dice perfectly while the other two players are impatiently waiting. And so that can happen. I think games can go on much longer than, you know, whatever the box says, 20 to 30 minutes. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But really, you know, and this game can be frustrating. This is not going to be a game for everyone. I think that if the problem you had with Robo Rally, like the problem that I had, was the extreme amount of randomness and having no control whatsoever, this is a game you should definitely try. It's not a guarantee that you're going to like it because you still have to give up a certain amount of control and understand that you're going to be frustrated at a certain point. But I do think that if I'm going to use sort of a cliche saying, I think this is the Eurogamer's Robo Rally, maybe. Because there's dice, but you're not rolling them, so maybe that'll bridge the gap between, you know, Eurogamers and Ameritrash. But it doesn't feel like an Ameritrash game to me. It feels very deterministic to a certain degree. It's, you know, it rewards strategy, but it's still fun, even if your strategies go horribly awry. This game, I'm probably going to keep. Robo Rally I wouldn't even consider purchasing if you want to go back to that comparison. But that's Volt. Very fun game if you're the right audience for it. Definitely one you should at least try. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.